Hello and welcome to The Rusted Brush. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I converted and painted my steam tank. This was voted by the community as my next unit to make for my Estalian army. I picked up this old used metal steam tank a while ago. The paint job is okay, but it's missing a few parts. It's missing the smokestack and a wheel most prominently. Now I want to convert and make this steam tank to look a bit more unique. It's supposed to have gone through Lustria on a campaign, so I've got a bunch of different bits I'm going to be adding to it. The wheels I'm replacing with some Lego wheels I had. I couldn't find any good Empire alternatives, either they were just too small or just didn't look right. The cannon I'm replacing with the Hellblaster volley guns barrels to add some uniqueness to it. I got this idea from the old steam tank variant called Old Reliable. I really wanted to get this as the steam tank actually, but its price is really expensive and it's just really hard to find as well. I'm going to add a bull skull as a way to signify it's an Estalian vehicle. I got a bunch of other bits for stowage and for some riders that I'll be showing more later. Before I start assembly, it's a bit dusty, which is the first thing I take care of by using some water and an old brush to wipe away the dust. While I wait for it to dry a bit, I start carving into the Lego wheel spokes. I'm trying to mimic wood grain, so I'm making lines that curve slightly and all in the same direction. This doesn't look like much right now, but later on this makes a huge impact. Next thing I work on is an improvised platform to hold some more stowage and other things like that. I do a rough cutting of some balsa wood strips I had. I want to have this feel like a field modification and not something that was professionally made, so I didn't do any specific measurements, I just did this all by hand. To glue it together, I use PVA glue. And while I wait for that to dry, I glue the gun barrels together and some books I had from the flagellant kits that'll be added to the platform. I start working on some of the riders. One of them I want to be a nobleman and his hound, one is a crewman getting some ammunition, and another is a marksman. I want the tank to feel like it's not currently in battle, and that it's just on the move. I also get more stowage from many different Empire kits ready. I felt like the tank should feel more lived in, and this is a good way to give it some personality and show influence from real life tanks. Now focusing on the Hellblaster barrels, I dry fit them to see how they look, and they're a bit too long, so I get a rough measurement and cut them to length and glue the barrels together. I got the idea having the barrels to be overlapping like you would see on a battleship, or something like that. Moving on, I glued the wheels to the chassis, and this was the paint to get right. In retrospect, I should have just pinned them to make it a lot easier to glue. Off camera, once I had the wheels on, I glued them to the base, and I added some walls to the wooden platform. One important thing that I'm not showing here is dry fitting. It's really important when you have a big project like this, they make sure that everything fits right before you start gluing. I trimmed off some of the metal bits where the platform was to sit. I glued all the different pieces of stowage to the platform. I glued a bull skull to the front, replacing the skull that was originally there. The barrels are also glued at this point too. The last piece I add is a lizardman shield to the turret to act like a trophy from Lustria. With that part done, it's time to prime this beast and get it ready for painting. I decided to prime the whole thing white, as there's a lot of wooden and other non-metallic areas that will be easier to paint with a white undercoat than a black undercoat, especially since I'd be using mostly speed paints and contrast paints. To start with, I used hardened leather speed paint for the top of the tank and the wheels. I then used ruddy fur and skeleton horde on the other wooden bits like the stowage and platform. I paint some of the storage cases with Basilicanum Grey. This is more of an undercoat than anything, and to help break up some of the colors. Next up is painting all the metal, and there's a lot of this. The first paint I use is Broadsword Silver Speed Paint. This is going to act as an undercoat for painting other metal colors on top of. I find this helps block in where I need to paint my metallics in a quick and very controlled fashion. I'm going to mention here that I won't be really showing you how I painted the crew, as I used mostly the same techniques from a previous video and for an upcoming video. Back to the metal, I use natural steel from AK 3rd Gen to paint every area that will stay as a steel color. I then pick all the areas I want gold and use Retributor armor to paint them. This will really help the tank look a little more prestigious and noble. I paint the smokestack and some of the piping near the end of the vehicle with warp block bronze. This would look a little boring and bland if I kept it steel or gold, so this was a good way to make a nice contrast. I paint the Lizardman shield with Achillean green and some of the books with Sigvald burgundy. One of the shields on the tank is painted with Blood Angels red, and another shield and scabbard are painted with Zealot yellow. These colors are what I associate Estalian with, so it felt fitting. The cannonballs and the cross on one of the shields are painted with Black Legion contrast paint. I then highlight the shield I painted red with Evil Sun's scarlet, and the yellow shield with Flash Gets yellow. Both of these, I'm using the airbrush versions of these paints as they're a bit thinner, but that means I'm going to have to put a few coats of this on. Now I go over every panel, rivet, and crevice with Nuln Oil to bring out some depth and to make it seem a bit more worn. It makes quite the difference from before and makes the whole model pop out. I then highlight the yellow shield with Flash Gets yellow to brighten up, and the same thing with the other shield with Evil Sun scarlet again. The gold is brightened up with Retributor armor, so it doesn't look as dull. For some more weathering, and to make the tank a little more like a tank, all the panels, rivets get an enamel wash of engine grime. I also make little streaks going downward as well with this. To me, a tank should never look clean and straight out of the factory. It means that the tank is a coward and never seen combat. Once it's dry, I wipe any excess off with white spirits. I highlight the wood boards with Xandu dust, trying to get mostly the raised areas and avoiding the crevices. I also do the same thing on some of the other wooden bits with XV88, specifically on the treasure chest and a pouch are highlighted with Catachin flesh. The cases are painted with Vallejo light gray. I thought this was a good, fairly neutral color for a storage case. Any bones on the model are highlighted with Ushabti bone. Moving to the gold trim, I highlight this with Liberator Gold to make it fairly bright and gaudy looking. For one of the more time-consuming parts of the model, I paint all the edges and rivets with dark aluminum from AK. I also use this to paint the scratches in the steel and to highlight the golden bits. This was such a rewarding part of finishing the model and made it feel like a proper tank to me. Last bit of the model to paint before basing was to add some black pigment to the gun barrels and the smokestack. With the crew and the steam tank painted, I glued the crew and the riders to the top and it was time for basing. Like the rest of my army, it gets the goblin green treatment for the trim, then I use PVA glue and my grass dirt mixture to paint the base. Once it's dry, I glued on and added some more vegetation. Unfortunately, I wanted to add more, but there isn't really a lot of space on the base without covering up some of the steam tank. And with that, the model is done. Here's a showcase of the finished model. So in lore, steam tanks are supposed to be exclusive to the Empire, so in my lore for my army, the steam tank was commissioned by an Estalian noble. This noble can be seen with his hound sitting on the tank. So there you go, my video is a bit late, but I finished painting this steam tank and a group of halberdiers as well. I decided I wanted the halberdiers to be a part of a mercenary company with my demigryphs. In real life, halberdiers were generally used for bodyguard or as vanguards, so these are going to be used to protect my demigryphs and the officers who hired them. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll put out another poll for what you guys want to see me paint next. Please remember to subscribe, share, and comment. Take care, everyone.